You are not certain if it is a memory or a dream. The desert stretches before you, endless and silent, its skin cracked and dry beneath the weight of 1,000,000 forgotten years. The air tastes of dust and warm stone, but also something else, something metallic, like rain that never comes. Above you, the sky is a black ocean, alive with stars so bright they look like shards of glass scattered across infinity. They flicker, they breathe, and sometimes you swear. They move. You lie there on your back, a child again, the rough surface of the rooftop pressing into your shoulders. The night is calm, the kind of calm that feels unnatural, as if the world is waiting for something. Crickets whisper their rhythms, and a faint breeze brushes across your skin like a secret being passed from one shadow to the next. You stare upward, not at the shapes of constellations, but at the spaces between them. The dark canvas where something greater might be hiding. Your mind drifts, floating in the desert silence, and then it comes, a fragment, like a broken whisper slipping into your ear. Do you see us? The words are not spoken in any voice you know. They do not enter through your ears, but through your bones, humming low, vibrating in the back of your skull. You blink, frozen, wondering if it is imagination or something reaching across the stars to brush against you. The stars do not answer. They only burn. You close your eyes for a moment, but the desert will not let you sleep. Its silence is too heavy, too loud. Every grain of sand, every shadow of cactus, every whispering wind feels alive, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. You open your eyes again, and there it is, the vast Arizona sky, a vault of darkness stretched so far it makes you feel small, smaller than you ever thought possible. You try to anchor yourself by tracing constellations, Orion's belt, Cassiopeia's throne, the curve of the Big Dipper. But even as you name them, your voice inside feels too quiet, too unsteady. These stars do not belong to you or to the stories you have been told. They belong to something else, something older, something that watches. You remember your parents' voices, faint as dust now. They told you stories of the desert, spirits that move through the sands, lights that appear on nights when the air is too still, legends that stretch back to the people who walked here long before cities were built, long before lights drowned out the heavens. Those stories were warnings, they said. The desert hides things, the sky reveals them. But as you lie there tonight, you cannot tell which feels more dangerous, the ground beneath you or the endless space above. The night deepens. Your eyes grow heavy, but sleep does not come. Instead, you slip into that strange in-between place, the borderland of dream and memory, where thoughts do not belong to you alone. You hear it again, softer this time, woven into the rhythm of your heartbeat. You are not alone. A shadow ripples across the stars. You sit up sharply, chest tight, eyes scanning the horizon. At first you think it must be a cloud, but the desert sky is clear, sharp as glass. The shape moves differently, slow, deliberate, like something vast passing silently through the heavens. You squint, but it is already gone, swallowed by the night. Did you see it, or did it see you? The question drifts with you as the night wears on. You cannot shake the feeling that the desert is alive in ways no one truly understands. The saguaro stand like ancient sentinels, their arms stretched upward as if reaching for answers themselves. The rocks hold heat from the sun, glowing faintly in your imagination as though they too had absorbed something from the stars. And always, always, the silence presses in, not empty, but full of things you cannot name. Time feels strange here. Minutes bleed into hours, and hours bleed into something deeper. You are not sure if you are awake or dreaming. In this haze, the stars begin to move. At first it is subtle, a faint shimmer, a suggestion of motion in the corner of your eye. But then it becomes undeniable. A cluster of lights shifts against the canvas of space, not twinkling, not wandering like satellites, but flowing, together, deliberate, like a school of fish in the deep black ocean of the night. Your breath catches, the lights drift into a shape, a pattern, a wide V cutting across the stars, too perfect to be chance. They move in silence, no hum, no roar, no thunder of engines, just a glide, a whisper of presence, as if the sky itself is rearranging. And then, just as suddenly as they came, the lights blink out. Gone. Your chest rises and falls quickly now, though the desert remains silent. You whisper to yourself, though you do not know why. Perhaps to remind yourself that you are still here, that you are real. The night answers with nothing and but stillness. You lie back again, but the rooftop feels different now. The world feels different now. Once the stars were just stars, beautiful, infinite, cold, but now you are not sure. Now they feel alive, watching, waiting. Your eyes blur with exhaustion and you drift at last into sleep. But even in sleep, the lights follow you. They hover behind your eyelids, glowing like embers, whispering words you cannot understand. You dream of shapes too vast to imagine, of shadows passing silently above your small body, of a sky that bends and folds like fabric. And always, always, that voice returns. Do you see us? You wake with a start, the desert sun rising, painting the world gold and red. Morning feels ordinary, almost painfully so. The crickets have gone quiet, the wind is warm again, and the rooftop is just a rooftop. Yet something has shifted. The memory lingers, sharp as glass. You cannot shake it, no matter how hard you try. The day moves on, but the night waits for you. It always does. And deep inside, you know this was only the beginning. You remember the silence first, not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of something vast, something eternal, pressing against your chest. The desert does not sleep. It waits. Even in daylight, it feels alive with things unseen, but at night, it becomes something else entirely. A watcher, a witness, a keeper of secrets. You are older now, though you still find yourself drawn back to the rooftop or to the edge of a lonely dirt road that snakes through cactus and stone. The air is different here. Dry, yes, but heavy too, as though every grain of sand has absorbed centuries of whispers and refuses to let them go. You listen, and though you hear no words, you sense a presence, always watching, always waiting. They used to tell stories, the old ones. Long before Phoenix sprawled its neon glow across the desert floor, before the highways carved their way into the soil, before the plains crisscrossed the sky, the people who came first spoke of moving lights, fire in the heavens that was not fire, silent travelers in the night drifting above the mesas like shadows painted with flame. They were not warnings, not exactly, but they were not comforts either. Eyes above, always above. The words come to you sometimes, as if whispered through time itself. You don't know whose voice it is, a fragment of something passed down through blood, through dust, through the endless watch of the stars. The desert is full of watchers. The coyote who stops at the edge of the brush, golden eyes glinting in starlight. The great saguaro, arms lifted toward the heavens as though frozen mid-prayer. The circling hawk, silent even as its shadow glides across the sand. You see them, and you feel them seeing you. And yet, behind them all, behind the creatures of fur and feather and thorn, there is another kind of gaze, something colder, something higher. You sense it most when the sky is at its clearest. Nights when the moon retreats, leaving nothing but an ocean of black and burning light. You tilt your head back and let your eyes adjust, and the longer you stare, the less the stars look like stars. They are too deliberate, too sharp, too alive. Sometimes one moves, just a flicker, just enough to make you doubt your own sight. But then another, and another. Each time, your heart beats a little faster, as though it is not only you watching them, but them watching you. Do not look away. The voice brushes through your skull again, not spoken, not thought, but felt. A vibration in your teeth, a resonance in your ribs. You shiver, though the night is warm, and then you hear it, the sound that is not a sound. The desert hum, not crickets, not wind, not distant engines. A deep, low thrum, like the earth itself is humming under its breath. You feel it in the ground when you place your hand against the dry dirt. A pulse, a rhythm. It lingers just long enough for you to wonder if it has always been there, waiting for you to notice. The watchers are patient. They do not rush. Nights pass, days blur, but they remain. You begin to notice them in the edges of conversations. Truckers on the highway talking about lights that hovered above them. Farmers pointing to strange burns in their fields. A neighbor swearing he saw a triangle blot out the stars above his backyard. Always dismissed, always laughed away. But the tone in their voices, half fear, half awe, tells you everything. You start keeping notes. Dates, times, weather, phases of the moon. At first it feels like a game, a puzzle to occupy restless nights. But as the pages fill, a pattern begins to take shape. Clusters of reports on clear nights, lights traveling in formations too precise for coincidence, disappearances in the silence of 3 a.m. The watchers are not random, they are deliberate, and with this realization comes another truth. You are not alone in your vigil. Across the desert, others are looking up too. People you will never meet, whose names you will never know, staring at the same sky, feeling the same gaze pressing down on them. Thousands of eyes on the ground, and something vast above, returning the stare. We have always been here. The whisper comes in your dreams now, threaded through the static of half-sleep. The words bend and distort, like radio waves bouncing across empty distances, carrying with them an intelligence that is not your own. You wake with sweat on your skin, your breath ragged, and yet you are not afraid. You are curious. There is wonder in it too. Fear, yes, but also wonder. To think that you are small and yet not forgotten. That something sees you, remembers you, reaches for you across the impossible gulf of the night. You feel a strange comfort in it, as though loneliness itself has been rewritten. Still, the unease never leaves. Because watchers do not only watch, eventually they act. On one of those nights, standing at the edge of the desert road, you see them again. Not flares, not planes, not anything that belongs to the earth you know. A cluster of lights, silent, moving in perfect formation. They drift above the horizon, unhurried, precise. You hold your breath, every nerve alive, waiting for sound that never comes. The lights pass overhead, and for a moment they seem endless. A shape so vast you cannot comprehend its edges. You feel it, more than see it, a pressure, a presence, blotting out the stars. Your knees weaken, your chest tightens. You cannot look away. And in that silence, the voices return, layered and strange, overlapping like echoes in a canyon. We see you. We see all of you. Do not forget. The words fade as quickly as they came. The lights drift into the distance, swallowed by the horizon. You are left trembling, staring into the vast dark, wondering if the desert itself will ever release you from its gaze. The watchers are not gone. They never are. And as you turn back toward the faint glow of the city, you know the silence has changed. It no longer feels empty. It feels crowded. You walk slowly, each step heavy, each shadow alive. The coyotes do not howl. The crickets do not sing. Even the wind has stilled, as if the desert itself is pausing, waiting for the next movement from above. You do not look back, but you feel it, like eyes in the sky, following you, always following. And deep inside, you know, this was only the beginning. You remember it not as a night, but as a feeling. The memory comes back in fragments, drifting like smoke through your thoughts. The warmth of the desert air clinging to your skin, the faint hiss of cicadas weaving through the silence, and above it all, the sky, vast, endless, alive with a million burning points of light. But there was something else, something wrong, or perhaps something hidden. Listen. The word was not spoken aloud. It slithered through your skull, quiet as a breath, soft as a dream. You froze when you felt it, unsure if it was memory, imagination, or a voice from somewhere beyond. And so you did. You listened. The desert has its own language. You've always known it. The scrape of the wind across dry stone, the distant bark of coyotes threading through the night, the shuffle of unseen creatures moving through the brush. But that night, those sounds faded until all that remained was a hum, a steady, low vibration, as if the earth itself had decided to speak. You pressed your palm to the ground and you felt it, faint, almost imperceptible, a rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat, not yours, not the earth's, something else, something buried deep and waiting to rise. The air shifted. You looked up. At first, it was only the stars, familiar, glittering, scattered like jewels across the heavens. But then, one moved, a small, faint glow, sliding silently across the night, too slow for a meteor, too steady for a plane. It drifted deliberately, as though it had chosen its path. Your chest tightened. You told yourself it was nothing, a satellite perhaps, just another man-made shadow wandering through the void. But even as you tried to explain it away, you knew better. The desert did not hum for satellites. The desert did not whisper for metal shells tumbling through the dark. And then you heard it again. "We are closer than you think." The words came like static, fractured, broken across dimensions. They did not belong to the night, but they filled it all the same. You stared at the light, and as you did, more appeared. Faint at first, then sharper, brighter, deliberate. 3 of them, gliding in formation, silent, perfect. Their glow was soft, not burning, not searing, but alive, like the shimmer of embers breathed into being. Your breath caught. You wanted to call out, to point, to share the vision with someone, anyone, but the desert was empty. Only you, the silence, and the watchers above. The lights shifted. Not like planes banking or stars wandering, but like dancers weaving together, parting, reforming. Patterns that spoke in a language you did not understand but felt deep in your bones. Each movement was a sentence. Each pause was a breath. They were speaking to you. Hear us. The whisper tangled itself in your thoughts, twisting them until you could no longer tell where your mind ended and theirs began. You pressed your hands against your ears, but it was useless. The voice was inside, resonating in the hollow spaces of your body. Your vision blurred. For a moment, you saw not the desert, not the sky, but something else. An ocean of black, vast shapes gliding through the void, their lights pulsing like veins of fire. They moved together, endlessly, silently, like a living constellation across eternity. And then you were back on the desert road, the dust cool beneath your feet, your chest heaving with shallow breaths. The lights were still there, hovering, pulsing, whispering. You should have been afraid. Every instinct told you so. But instead, you felt wonder, a deep, aching wonder that pulled tears to your eyes. To be small, yet seen. To be insignificant, yet noticed. You felt exposed and cherished all at once, like a secret discovered in the folds of the universe. The lights shifted again, brighter now, closer. You swore you could see their outlines, not just glowing orbs, but shapes behind them, angles, shadows, vast forms hidden in the night, blotting out the stars. You staggered backward, breath caught in your throat as the realization bloomed within you. This was not just light. This was not just sky. Something enormous was moving above you. We are here. The words struck like a wave, flooding your chest, drowning your thoughts. You clutched at your temples, trying to hold yourself together, but the voices only deepened, layered over one another, countless whispers speaking as one. Images tore through your mind, a horizon of endless stars, a city of lights not built by hands, eyes that were not eyes, staring into you, through you, beyond you. You gasped, feeling as though the sky itself had bent down to peel back the thin fabric of your soul. And then, silence. The lights faded. One by one, they dimmed, dissolving into the blackness until nothing remained but the familiar pinpricks of starlight. Your body trembled, your knees weakened. The desert was quiet again. Too quiet, as though it, too, had witnessed what you had seen and could not bear to speak of it. You stood there for a long time, waiting for the lights to return, for the voices to echo once more, for proof that you had not slipped into madness. But nothing came, only silence, vast and heavy. The wind rose again, carrying with it the scent of dust and sage. The coyotes called from a distance, their cries sharp against the stillness. The desert, it seemed, had returned to normal. But you had not. Something inside you had shifted. The memory of those lights, of the voices, the whispers, the impossible patterns in the sky, etched itself deep into your mind. You knew, beyond all reason, that you had been touched by something far greater than yourself. And though the night looked ordinary once more, you would never look at it the same way again. You turned slowly, your steps heavy as you made your way back. The road felt longer than before, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. Each step echoed in your mind, a reminder that the watchers were still there, hidden, patient, waiting for the next time you would look up. Do not forget us. The final whisper followed you into your dreams that night. A voice without a body, a message without an origin. You tossed beneath your sheets, your skin still humming, your heart still racing. Sleep came, but it was not restful. You dreamed of skies filled with lights, of vast silhouettes gliding soundlessly above your home, of voices calling, not just to you, but to thousands, maybe millions. A chorus of whispers threading through the world, carried on the breath of the stars. You woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, your pulse pounding. The dream clung to you like cobwebs, impossible to shake. You stepped outside, hoping the cool desert air would clear your mind, but when you lifted your eyes to the horizon, you froze. There, in the faint light of morning, a glow lingered. Not the sun, not the stars, something else, something waiting. The watchers were not gone. They had only hidden themselves in the folds of the sky, and you knew with bone-deep certainty that this was only the beginning, and soon you would know what for. You remember it first as a shadow, not a shadow cast by the sun, but a weight that crept into the corners of your mind, growing heavier each time you looked at the sky. It wasn't darkness exactly. It was the knowledge of something larger, something vast, pressing down on you from above. The lights had come once, and you told yourself maybe it was nothing. But the nights after, the desert no longer felt the same. Even in daylight, you felt it. The air carried a thickness, as though unseen eyes were hidden behind the veil of blue. The mountains seemed taller, looming, their ridges like sentinels watching your every move. You tried to push the feeling away, to pretend life was ordinary again. Yet whenever you closed your eyes, the lights burned against the inside of your eyelids, glowing and pulsing as if they belonged there. We do not leave. The whisper returned to you in fragments, sometimes just before sleep, sometimes in the still hush of afternoon. It never came from outside, it came from within, a presence threaded through your thoughts, layered beneath your heartbeat. At first you told yourself it was your imagination, that your mind was conjuring echoes of what you had seen, but the more you tried to dismiss it, the stronger it became. The desert itself seemed to conspire with the whispers, feeding them with silence, with shadows, with its endless horizon of sky. You began to notice things, subtle at first. The way your dog barked at nothing, her body stiff, her eyes locked on the heavens as though she saw shapes you could not. The way the radio crackled in the middle of a song, broken by a hiss of static that seemed almost like words, almost like voices just beyond your ability to understand. And then there were the nights when the shadows grew thicker, heavier, pressing against your skin like damp cloth. Those were the nights when you stayed awake, sitting by the window, watching the sky. One night, it happened again. The stars glittered as usual, scattered across the velvet black of the heavens. But in the distance, faint at first, came a glow. A soft, shifting light, rising over the horizon. It was too bright to be a star, too still to be a plane. Your pulse quickened as it grew larger, closer, moving with slow, deliberate grace. You held your breath. The light split into 3, then 5, then 7. They hovered in formation, silent, pulsing faintly, painting the desert floor with their pale glow. You stepped outside, the air cool against your skin, the smell of creosote and dust sharp in your nose. The world was hushed, as if every living thing had gone still to watch. Even the coyotes were silent. Even the insects held their breath. The lights moved together, forming a shape, a V, wide and steady, cutting through the night like a blade. You craned your neck upward, your chest tight, your hands trembling. And then, once again, the stars disappeared. Something massive passed overhead, darker than the sky itself, blotting out the constellations as though swallowing them whole. You could not see its edges, could not grasp its scale, only the faint outline suggested by the glowing lights along its body. Do you feel us? The whisper filled your skull, louder now, stronger, not one voice, but many, layered and strange, speaking in unison. You staggered back, clutching at your temples, though there was nothing to block, nothing to silence. Your knees gave way, and you sank into the dirt, your eyes locked on the impossible shape above. It stretched across the heavens, vast and silent, gliding with the weightless movement of a shadow. You tried to measure it, to contain it within your mind, but the scale broke you. It was too large, too alien, too far beyond what your body could endure, and yet you could not look away. The lights pulsed brighter, as though answering some unspoken question within you. Patterns shifted, lines rearranged, glowing in rhythms that felt deliberate. Language, though not one you could speak. Communication through light, through presence, through silence itself. We are with you. The words slid into your bones. You gasped, the sound swallowed by the immensity of the sky. Your skin tingled, every hair standing on end, as though your body had become an antenna for something vast and unseen. You saw flashes, images burned into your mind. A desert not of earth, but of stars, endless and glowing. Shapes gliding through black oceans, their bodies lined with fire. Cities not made of stone or steel, but of light, suspended in emptiness. For a moment, you felt as though you were drifting among them, a weightless observer pulled across the folds of the universe, and then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The lights flickered, dimmed, and vanished into the night. The shadows above dissolved, releasing the stars once more. The desert was empty again, too empty. You sat there in the dirt, trembling, your breath shallow. The silence pressed against you like a living thing. You wanted to believe it was over, that the watchers had passed and left you behind, but you knew better. Shadows do not vanish. They linger. They grow. Over the days that followed, the feeling only deepened. You walked among people, but you felt apart, distant, as though you carried a secret no one else could touch. At the grocery store, at the gas station, on the bus, you looked at faces and wondered if they too had seen, if they too carried the whispers in their bones. But no one spoke. No one looked at the sky the way you did. And so the secret grew heavier. The shadows lengthened. They followed you in waking hours, stretching across the ground in ways that felt unnatural, twisting when the sun shifted, curling at the edges of your vision. At night, they thickened in the corners of your room, shapes darker than darkness itself, pressing close when you closed your eyes. We remain. The voices soothed and haunted in equal measure. Sometimes they felt gentle, almost tender, as though reaching out to reassure. Other times, they pressed sharp and cold, like blades against your mind. You could not tell if they meant comfort or warning. Perhaps both. You began to notice the hum again. The low vibration that rose from the earth, from the air, from the very space around you. It pulsed faintly, growing louder in the quiet hours of night. You pressed your hand to the walls of your home and felt it trembling there, as though the building itself had become hollow, resonating with something vast and unseen. Each night you waited, and each night the sky felt heavier. You knew the watchers had not left. You knew they were circling, closer each time, growing shadows above a city that did not yet realize it was being watched. And deep within, a truth began to bloom, a truth you could not deny. They were not simply passing through, they were waiting. You remember the night not as a date, but as a feeling. The calendar said March 13th, 1997, But for you, it was simply the night. The night when the desert air changed. The night when shadows deepened. The night when the sky itself lowered its face to meet yours. It begins in fragments, the warm dusk settling over Phoenix, the glow of orange fading into purple, the mountains silhouetted against a horizon that still burned faintly from the sun's retreat. The city hummed its usual rhythm, cars flowing across freeways, televisions flickering behind drawn curtains, dogs barking in backyards. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing warned you of what was coming. And yet, somewhere deep inside, you felt it. A restlessness, a vibration, as though the air was too heavy, the silence too sharp. The desert has always spoken to you in whispers, but tonight, its voice seemed louder. Look up. The thought slid into your mind so softly you almost mistook it for your own. But it wasn't yours. You knew that instantly. It came from somewhere else. So you did. At first, you saw only stars, familiar constellations scattered across the blackness, twinkling the way they always did. But then, in the distance, near the horizon, a glow appeared. Small, pale, drifting. You narrowed your eyes, expecting it to flicker out, but instead, it grew. Another appeared beside it, then another. 3, 5, 7. They moved slowly, deliberately, hovering in formation as if guided by an unseen hand. Your breath caught. The glow was too steady for meteors, too silent for aircraft, too deliberate for chance. These were not stars. They were lights, lights alive with purpose. You stepped into the street, and you weren't alone. Doors opened. Neighbors came out. Families gathered in driveways, pointing upward. Conversations fell quiet. The world seemed to hold its breath as the lights glided across the sky. They ched into a vast V shape, their points glowing with a steady, almost organic radiance. They weren't blinking like aircraft lights. They weren't flaring like fireworks. They pulsed softly, like the beating of a heart. And then you saw it, the darkness between the lights. It was not empty. It was not sky. It was something. A shape so enormous it defied reason. A shadow that blocked out the stars as it passed. A craft, if that word could even contain it, gliding silently above the city. No engines, no sound, no explanation, just presence. Vast, overwhelming presence. Your knees weakened. The hair on your arms rose. You felt smaller than you ever had before. We are here. The whisper filled you, vibrating through your bones, threading through your thoughts until you no longer knew if it came from outside or within. The voices layered together, countless and strange, overlapping in a harmony that was not human. The craft moved slowly, almost gracefully, as though it wanted to be seen. It drifted across neighborhoods, across highways, across the desert floor, witnessed by thousands of eyes. You could feel them all, those strangers staring upward, just as you were. Families clutching each other in awe, children pointing with wide eyes, truckers pulling to the side of the road, engines idling, pilots in the sky falling silent as their instruments failed to explain what they saw. For one night, a city of millions became united in silence, heads tilted back, hearts pounding in the same rhythm. The craft passed overhead, so low it seemed you could reach out and touch it. You strained your ears, desperate for a sound, but there was nothing. Not a hum, not a roar, only silence. And in that silence, the voices came again. We see you. We have always seen you. Your chest tightened. Your breath came shallow. You wanted to run, yet you could not move. You wanted to look away, yet you could not blink. The sky had swallowed you whole, and you were powerless to resist. The craft stretched on, so large it seemed endless. The lights glowed above like burning stars pinned to a shadow. It moved past you slowly, deliberately, giving you time to drink in its immensity. When at last it drifted beyond, disappearing toward the southern horizon, the silence remained. No one spoke. No one dared. The desert air hung heavy, thick with awe, thick with terror, thick with wonder. But the night was not finished. Hours later, the lights returned. Not one craft this time, but clusters. orbs glowing faintly, rising into the air, hovering in patterns too precise for chance. They appeared over the mountains, over the city, over the desert floor. People watched from rooftops, from backyards, from cars parked on highways, everywhere, eyes locked on the heavens. Do not forget. The whisper was sharper now, resonant, as if etched into the sky itself. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the lights vanished. One by one they faded, swallowed by the night, leaving only the familiar stars. The world exhaled. Conversations returned, frantic and trembling. Phone lines flooded with voices, each one echoing the same story. News stations scrambled, authorities dismissed it. Yet, thousands knew what they had seen. And you were one of them. That night, when you finally closed your eyes, the images would not leave you. The V-shaped craft, the glowing orbs, the silence that was not silence, the voices that spoke without sound. You tossed and turned, whispering to yourself that maybe you had imagined it, that maybe it was nothing, but each time you told yourself the lie, the desert whispered back, "We are here." The shadows stretched longer, the silence grew heavier, the sky pressed closer, and deep in your bones you knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. You remember the silence first, not just yours, but everyone's. On March 13th, the moment stretched outward, branching like roots into thousands of homes, thousands of hearts. The craft was not yours alone. The lights did not belong to you. They belonged to the city, to the desert, to all of them. And in that silence, for a fleeting hour, you felt a strange kind of unity, because everywhere across Arizona, thousands of eyes tilted skyward. The boy standing barefoot in his backyard, clutching his father's arm, his small chest rising and falling with wonder. The trucker pulling his rig onto the shoulder, headlights cutting into sand as he leaned against the hood, lips parted in awe. The pilot flying high above, his instruments steady, yet his eyes locked on the impossible formation gliding beneath him. You did not know them. You would never meet them. And yet in that moment, you were bound together, linked by the same vision, the same silence, the same haunting presence above. The desert air grew heavy, almost electric, as though charged with a current that threaded through every witness at once. You felt it in your bones, the sense of being part of something enormous, something undeniable. "We see you all," the whisper pressed into your skull. But this time, it did not feel private. It did not feel singular. It felt vast, echoing outward into the minds of others. You knew, without proof, without reason, that they were hearing it too. For a moment, the city was one heart. Imagine the sight. Neighborhoods spilling into the streets, children pointing with wide eyes, mothers holding their breath, fathers falling silent. Cars slowed on highways, their taillights glowing red as drivers pulled to the side of the road to watch. Conversations across the desert halted mid-sentence, voices trailing into stunned silence as eyes turned upward. The craft moved deliberately, as though widening the gaze of an entire population, slowly, purposefully, giving everyone time to see. And they did. From Phoenix to Prescott, from Tucson to Tempe, from tiny desert towns to crowded suburbs, thousands of people stood beneath the same sky, eyes locked on the same impossibility, the same silent V-shaped shadow blotting out the stars, the same glowing lights, steady and unblinking, gliding like a crown of fire. Some trembled, some wept, some whispered prayers, but all of them saw. Together, you remember. The whisper braided itself into your thoughts again, but softer now. Not commanding, not demanding, almost tender, as if this moment was a gift. You tried to imagine what the others were feeling. Did they hear it the way you did? Did they sense the voices threading through the silence? You would never know. But you were certain of one thing. You were not alone anymore. The desert stretched outward like a stage, and for once, the audience was united. Thousands of eyes staring upward, thousands of hearts beating in time with the glowing lights. You could feel it, the collective pulse. It was awe, yes. It was terror too. But above all, it was wonder. For generations, people had spoken of strange lights in the desert, whispers of visitors, shadows crossing the stars, fire that was not fire. But always, those stories belonged to the few. A neighbor, a friend, a voice lowered over coffee, dismissed as imagination. Not this time. This time, the story was not whispered. It was shouted across the horizon, burned into the memory of thousands. This time, the watchers revealed themselves to more than one. This time, there could be no denial, or so you thought. But denial is powerful. You would learn that soon enough. For now, though, in that moment, denial had not yet arrived. Only silence, only awe, only the unity of thousands of souls staring upward, caught in the same sun. Pell. You could almost feel their thoughts brushing against yours, thousands of minds linked in a web of disbelief and wonder, a chorus of whispers threading through the desert night. We are with you. The voices swelled, softer than breath, yet louder than thought. And then, like the lights themselves, they scattered, vanishing into silence. The craft moved on, disappearing into the southern horizon, swallowed by the blackness. People stood still, necks craned, reluctant to look away, afraid that blinking might erase it all. When at last the sky returned to normal, murmurs began. Trembling words carried across streets, across radios, across phone lines. Families rushed inside, calling neighbors, calling friends, calling news stations. Reports flooded in, some shaky, some frantic, some disbelieving. You heard it in fragments, static on televisions, voices over the radio, stories whispered at gas stations and corner stores, all different, yet all the same. I saw it too. It was silent, it was huge, it was real. We all saw it. And you realized something important. The watchers had not just appeared for you. They had appeared for everyone. It was a gift and a burden all at once. Because thousands of witnesses meant thousands of voices and thousands of questions. The silence of the desert was no longer silent. It had become a roar of disbelief, of awe, of fear, of denial. The city could no longer look at the sky without remembering the night it changed. You walked back inside that night, but sleep would not come. The memory pressed too heavy against your chest, humming too loud in your mind. Even with the lights gone, you felt their presence. The watchers remained. Do not look away. The whisper lingered as your eyes closed. You dreamed of thousands of faces, all staring upward in silence, eyes wide, mouths parted, souls caught in the same impossible vision. And somewhere, in that dream, you realized the truth. If thousands saw it, then thousands remembered. And if thousands remembered, then the shadows could not hide forever. Or could they? Because as dawn crept over the desert, you began to sense something else. A different kind of silence, colder, sharper. The silence not of awe, but of denial. And deep inside, you knew, the shadows were not finished. They had only just begun to grow. You do not remember the moment the lights became something more. One instant, they were only glows in the distance, drifting silently across the night. The next, they were attached to something vast, something so immense it swallowed the sky whole. At first, your mind refused to accept it. The brain clings to familiar explanations, planes, helicopters, balloons, but no. None of those could blot out the stars the way this did. None of those could silence an entire city with their presence alone. You felt it before you saw it. A heaviness, as though gravity itself had shifted. Your lungs worked harder, your heart beat faster. The air was still, but charged, humming faintly like static, clinging to your skin. And then, above you, the shape revealed itself. It was not light, it was not sky, it was something else. Black against black, its outline was visible only because it erased the heavens. The stars disappeared in its path, swallowed by an expanse of shadow too perfect, too deliberate to be natural. You craned your neck, eyes wide, breath shallow. The lights were only markers, small beacons pinned to the edges of something far greater. A triangle, a wing, a floating city. It was impossible to know. It was too large for your mind to hold. We are above you. The whisper resonated through your skull, not words, not sound, but thought layered over thought, vibrating in places your ears could never reach. It filled you, pressing against every corner of your consciousness. Your knees weakened. You wanted to kneel, though you didn't know if it was fear or reverence guiding you. The sheer immensity of it broke something inside you, some quiet illusion that the sky was empty, that you were safe beneath it. The craft moved silently, gliding like a shadow given shape. You searched for engines, for exhaust, for the roar of machines, but there was nothing, only silence, only the faint, pulsing glow of lights marking its impossible body. You thought of all the others who must be staring upward in that same moment. Children clutching parents, strangers standing shoulder to shoulder in awe, thousands of eyes reflecting the same vast shadow. And yet, despite their presence, you felt utterly alone beneath it, because the shape above you was looking back, not just at you, not just at the city, at everything. We see you all. The voice echoed again, layered, countless, as though spoken by a chorus stretched across dimensions. You pressed your hands against your ears, but it made no difference. The voice was not outside, it was inside. The craft drifted lower, or perhaps it only seemed that way. The scale was impossible to judge. One moment it felt as high as the stratosphere, the next so low you imagined you could touch it. You swore you felt a vibration through the ground, though no sound reached your ears. Shapes shifted in the dark body above, angles, curves, vast geometric lines that seemed to shimmer faintly, not made of metal, not made of stone, but of something else, something alive, or something that mimicked life. Your breath caught as the thought bloomed unbidden. This is not a machine. This was presence, entity, vessel, and being at once. You felt the weight of it pressing into your mind, bending your thoughts the way gravity bends light. You were small, insignificant, yet impossibly significant at the same time, for in that moment you were noticed. Do not fear. The whisper softened, not threatening now, but soothing, like a hand against the back of your head. Yet even in its calm, your fear deepened, because fear does not always come from danger. Sometimes it comes from awe too vast to contain. The craft continued its glide, unhurried, as though time itself bent for it. Your eyes watered from staring, but you could not look away. You wanted to see the end of it, to trace its edges, to prove it had a limit. But each time you thought you had found its end, the shape stretched farther, swallowing more stars, bending more sky. It was endless, a shadow with no boundaries. And within that endlessness, your thoughts began to fracture. You saw flashes again, like images burned into your vision. A field of stars rearranging into shapes too precise to be chance. Eyes like molten light, watching without blinking. Vast corridors of darkness filled with whispers that did not echo. You blinked hard, trying to shake them away, but the images clung to you like afterglow. The craft passed directly overhead now. Your body trembled as you realized just how silent it was. Not a hum, not a drone, not even the faintest sound of displacement. It was as though it existed outside the rules of the world you knew. Neighbors gasped softly in the distance. You could hear their awe, their fear, their disbelief. Yet none of them spoke loudly. The silence demanded reverence. The silence was sacred. You tilted your head back until your neck ached, staring at the endless shadow that hung above. For a fleeting second, you thought you saw movement within it, shapes shifting, glowing faintly like windows or eyes, watching from within the body of the craft. Do you understand? The voice pressed into you again, heavy, patient, impossible to answer. Did you? Did anyone? Your heart thundered, your breath shallow. You did not speak. You could not. You only stared, trembling, beneath the shape that owned the sky. And then, slowly, the craft moved on. It glided toward the horizon, its shadow releasing the stars one by one as it passed. The night sky re-emerged behind it, fragile, delicate, as though it had been hidden all along. The The silence lingered long after it was gone. The air was still charged, heavy with awe. No one around you spoke. They couldn't. Words were too small for what had just filled the heavens. You stood there long into the night, your body trembling, your eyes burning, your thoughts scattered, because now you knew. The lights were not lights, the whispers were not dreams, the watchers were not imagination. There was shape above you, vast, impossible, undeniable. And deep inside, you realized a truth that chilled you. If it could blot out the stars, it could blot out you. The night was not over, and the watchers were not finished. You remember the quiet, not the quiet of midnight streets, not the gentle hush of a desert breeze, but a quiet so deep it felt unnatural, as if the world itself had paused to listen. Phoenix was never silent. The city lived on motion, the hum of traffic, the glow of neon signs, the rattle of trains in the distance, televisions flickering through curtained windows. But on that night, March 13th, it was different. The lights had come, and with them came a silence that swallowed everything. It began small. A single neighborhood, standing still in their driveways, eyes lifted to the heavens. A man lowering his newspaper, frozen at the sight. A child tugging on their mother's sleeve, voice caught in their throat. Then it spread like a ripple across water until the entire city was caught in its grasp. Cars slowed on highways. People abandoned televisions and radios, stepping outside into the cool desert night. Downtown towers, suburban streets, trailer parks, and open fields, all of them united by the same impossible sight. Above, the craft glided silently, lights glowing, shadows stretching, and Phoenix, millions of hearts, millions of breaths, fell still. Do not move. The whisper pressed into you again, layered and strange. You knew it wasn't only you. The thought reached outward, carried across rooftops and streets, threading into thousands of minds at once. It wasn't a command. It was a suggestion, a pull, a presence that asked for silence and was obeyed. You could feel it in your chest, the weight of stillness, the hum of anticipation, the unbearable pause before something breaks. The city held its breath. Picture it. Neighborhoods lined with families, some clutching binoculars, some clutching each other. A man on a rooftop with a camcorder, its red light glowing faintly as he tried to capture the impossible. Teenagers lying on hoods of cars, mouths open, pointing up Ard. Police officers pulled over at the side of the road, their radios buzzing with reports they could not comprehend. No one shouted, no one laughed. No one spoke above a whisper, because the shape above was too large, too silent, too deliberate. It felt alive. You stood there with them, though separated by streets and distance. You felt the unity of that moment. Thousands of eyes staring upward, thousands of breaths caught in unison. The craft drifted above you all, unhurried, as though it knew it was being seen, as though it wanted to be. The stars vanished in its path, swallowed by its immensity. Some said it was a mile wide, some said larger. None of you could measure it, because it stretched beyond the limits of your imagination. We are here. The whisper echoed again, not thunderous, not loud, but filling every space, every silence. It threaded through your bones, vibrated in your teeth, curled inside the base of your skull. You gasped softly, though no sound escaped your lips. Around you, others did the same. Small inhalations, faint tremors in the night air, but still no words. Because words were too small for what filled the sky. You could see it more clearly now. The body of the craft was not just shadow. Its edges shimmered faintly, as though outlined in something more than light. A geometry that shifted when you tried to focus on it. Angles that bent the wrong way. Curves that seemed endless. Not built, but grown. Not manufactured, but alive. Your eyes watered from staring, but you could not look away. The silence deepened, not just around you, but within you. Your thoughts slowed. Your body felt heavy, as though time itself had thickened. You blinked, and when you opened your eyes again, you weren't certain how much time had passed. Seconds, minutes, hours. The craft remained, silent, patient, watching. And so did you. You began to imagine the city not as streets and lights, but as a single living being. One vast organism with thousands of eyes lifted upward, each person a cell, each gaze a spark, all connected in a shared pulse of awe. Together, you see. The voice soothed, almost tender now, as though speaking not to individuals, but to the city itself. You shivered, because in that moment you realized Phoenix was not just a place. Phoenix was an audience. The craft moved slowly, drifting from the north toward the south, passing silently above mountains and neighborhoods. People tracked it, walking alongside from the ground, heads tilted back, as though unwilling to let it go. You followed too, each step heavy, each breath shallow. The silence of the city pressed against you, an invisible weight. No barking dogs, no honking horns, no laughter from porches or music from open windows. Only the hum of the watchers, only the glow of their lights. The desert seemed to amplify it, its vast emptiness serving as a stage. The red rocks, the saguaros, the jagged spines of the mountains, all of them spectators, all of them frozen in the same impossible awe. And still, the city held its breath. Somewhere in the distance, you thought you saw flashes, small bursts of light, like cameras or headlights, as people tried to capture the impossible. But even those seemed subdued, swallowed by the immensity above. The craft glided on, unhurried, deliberate, and you wondered how many saw. Thousands? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? You felt the answer ripple through you, though it was not yours. All of you. The whisper filled you again, resonant and vast. You staggered slightly, your knees weak, your chest heavy. The collective awe pressed down like a physical force. You could almost feel the presence above acknowledging not just you, but everyone. It saw the city, it saw the eyes, it saw Tug. His stillness. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the moment shifted. The lights began to fade. One by one, they dimmed, dissolving into the blackness. The shape above seemed to unravel, swallowed by the same darkness it had once erased. A murmur broke the silence, small at first, then growing. Words tumbled clumsily from lips that had been sealed too long. Voices cracked with fear, with awe, with disbelief. Cars restarted, dogs barked, televisions flickered again. The city exhaled, but the silence did not leave you. It lingered, clinging to your skin, humming faintly in your bones. You knew, even as people spoke again, even as the night returned to its rhythm, that Phoenix would never truly forget. For one night, a city of millions held its breath. And you know, with a certainty that chills you, that the watchers had not gone. They had only chosen when to leave, and when to return. You remember the fading most of all, not the arrival, not the awe, not even the immense shadow blotting out the stars, though all of that lingers like fire etched into your memory. No, what stays with you deepest is the moment it left, the moment the lights vanished. It begins subtly, one glow dimming, just slightly, like a candle's flame flickering in the breeze. You blink, expecting it to flare again, but it doesn't. Instead, the light shrinks, smaller and smaller, until it dissolves into the night, leaving nothing but empty black. And then another follows, and another, a pattern of disappearance, one by one, until the sky is left bare. The voices around you falter, caught between awe and confusion. Someone gasps, someone whispers a prayer, but most remain silent, frozen in disbelief, watching as the impossible dissolves like smoke into the air. We are gone, but not. The whisper brushes your mind, sharp and soft all at once. It doesn't feel final. It doesn't feel like leaving. It feels like retreat, like a hand withdrawing just out of reach but not truly gone. You stare upward, desperate to hold on to every last glimmer. The lights were steady, constant, alive, and now they slip away so easily, so quietly, as if they were never there. The stars return in their place, cold and familiar, as though nothing had happened at all. And that is what terrifies you most, because for hours you had been living beneath a sky transformed, a sky alive with presence, with shadow, with watchers. Now, suddenly, you are returned to the ordinary. The constellations shine as they always have, aloof and indifferent. The desert breeze stirs again. The city begins to breathe. But you are not fooled. The ordinary sky feels wrong now. Too perfect, too empty. It feels like a mask pulled hastily back over something vast and hidden. The people around you murmur. Some laugh nervously, shaking tongue. Earheads, already dismissing what they saw. Others cry softly, overwhelmed. A few stare upward still, waiting, refusing to believe it's over. You are one of them, because in your bones, you know it isn't. We remain. The whisper hums faintly, so faint you almost convince yourself you imagined it, but the echo lingers in your chest, threaded into the rhythm of your heartbeat. The lights are gone, yes, but gone is not the same as absent. The city begins to stir. Cars rumble back to life, their headlights slicing through the desert dark. Dogs bark in backyards. The hum of televisions filters once more through open windows. But beneath it all, there is unease, a lingering silence in the spaces between sounds, because everyone knows what they saw. You walk slowly back toward your home, each step heavy, each shadow longer than it should be. The world looks the same, but you feel the difference in your bones. The air feels charged, still humming with something invisible. When you finally lie down, the darkness of your room feels heavier than usual. The ceiling above seems vast, endless, as though the shadow of the craft still lingers there, stretching into infinity. You close your eyes, but the afterimage remains, lines of lights forming a V, glowing steadily, burning against your eyelids. You try to banish them, but they will not fade. And then, in the borderland between waking and sleep, you hear it again. Do not forget. The words slide into your thoughts like threads of static, bending your dreams, reshaping them into visions you cannot escape. You dream of the disappearing lights, but in your dream, they don't just vanish. They fold, curling inward, collapsing into a point of brilliance before unraveling again across the sky. You see patterns, mathematical, deliberate, etched in light and shadow, written in a language you cannot understand but can almost feel. When you wake, your chest is tight, your sheets damp with sweat. The memory clings like cobwebs, impossible to shake. You step outside, searching the sky for any sign, but there is nothing, only stars, only silence. The city has begun to move on. People whisper of it, yes, but the voices grow scattered. Some cling to the truth of what they saw, others laugh it away. News stations call it flares. Officials dismiss it as imagination. But you know, because you were there, because you saw the stars disappear, because you felt the silence of a city holding its breath, and because you remember the vanishing, not as an ending, but as a pause, a curtain drawn closed, hiding something vast just beyond reach. The disappearing lights did not end the story, they began it. We are waiting. The whisper hums again, almost playful, almost tender. It carries a promise, or perhaps a warning. You cannot tell which. You shiver, staring upward into the empty sky. You wonder if the watchers are still there, cloaked in shadow, hidden in plain sight. Perhaps they never left at all. Perhaps they are waiting for the moment to reveal themselves again. The thought chills you, and yet, deep inside, it thrills you too. Because now, every night, when you look up, you wonder, is tonight the night they return? You remember the first voice not as sound, but as a crack. Like the snapping of thin glass, the silence of the city broke. For hours, Phoenix had been united in stillness, a vast organism of eyes tilted skyward, breathing as one. The watchers had passed, the lights had vanished, and for a moment afterward, it seemed as if no one dared to speak, as if words themselves were too fragile to touch the memory. But then, a single voice rose, a whisper in the dark. I saw it. And just like that, the flood began. The silence unraveled into a torrent of voices, each one desperate, each one trembling, each one carrying the same message. I saw it too. Phone lines lit up like veins of fire. Newsrooms were drowned in calls, reporters scribbling frantically as voices cracked over static-filled lines. Police dispatchers listened as citizens poured out their stories, unable to contain their awe. Neighbors gathered in clusters, their words tumbling over each other, trying to weave sense into what they had all just seen. You heard it in fragments, through radios, through open windows, through voices carried on the desert breeze. I was driving on the freeway, and it passed right over my car. It was huge, bigger than a football field. No sound at all. My whole family saw it. We all did. It wasn't flares. Don't tell me it was flares. I know what I saw. Each voice carried urgency, fear, wonder, relief, as if speaking it aloud anchored the moment into reality, proof that it had not been a dream. And yet, the more the voices grew, the stranger the night became, because each story was the same. Different mouths, different lives, different streets, but always the same words, the same descriptions, the same awe. A massive V-shaped craft, lights steady and unblinking, gliding silently across the sky. Together, you remember. The whisper curled into your mind again, softer now, threaded into the chorus of human voices. It was not just your memory anymore. It belonged to everyone. You sat at the edge of your bed, listening. The radio crackled with call after call, voices from across the city and beyond, each trembling with the same story. Reporters tried to stay calm, but their voices wavered, betraying the weight of the night. The flood of voices grew louder, faster, unstoppable. It was as if the city had been holding its breath, and now, all at once, it exhaled. Picture it. Switchboards lighting up in news stations, operators frantically answering phones, their pens scratching across paper as stories poured in from every corner of Arizona. Prescott, Phoenix, Tucson, towns you had never heard of, linked in the same impossible vision. Hundreds of voices, thousands. Do not let them silence you. The whisper pressed against your ribs, urgent, insistent. You shivered because you felt the truth in it. Already you could sense the shadow of denial creeping close. Already you could hear the voices of officials preparing to explain it away. But for now, the flood was too strong. The voices poured outward, unstoppable, a tidal wave of memory. In living rooms, families replayed the night in frantic detail, gesturing wildly, pointing at the ceiling as though the craft might return. On street corners, strangers who had never spoken to each other found themselves bound together, describing the same impossible shadow. Police radios crackled with identical reports from officers stationed miles apart, their disbelief barely hidden. You closed your eyes, letting the voices wash over you. They were frantic, yes. Trembling, yes. But they were also alive. Alive with wonder, alive with awe, alive with truth. And in their flood, you felt a strange comfort, because now you were not alone. The watchers had not just visited you, they had visited thousands, and those thousands carried the same memory, the same echo, the same whisper threaded into their bones. The flood of voices became a storm. Television anchors spoke of strange reports with forced calm, their eyes betraying unease. Radio hosts tried to laugh it away, but their voices cracked. Amateur footage flickered across screens, shaky lights captured against the black desert sky, and through it all, the phone lines screamed, voices layered over voices, stories overlapping until they blurred into a single chorus. We saw, we all saw. You cannot erase us. The whisper surged, louder now, carried within the chorus, woven into the flood. You pressed your hands against your ears, but it was useless. The voices were everywhere, on the radio, on the television, outside your window, inside your head, and yet you did not want them to stop, because this was not madness, this was memory, shared, woven across thousands of minds at once. The flood roared into the night, rising higher, unstoppable. But already you sensed the tide beginning to turn. For every voice trembling with truth, another voice rose in denial. Officials muttered about flares, skeptics whispered about planes, scientists shrugged. The narrative of dismissal began its slow creep into the conversation, seeding doubt, bending the flood into confusion. You felt anger stir in your chest, but beneath it, a deeper fear, because you knew denial was powerful, strong enough to drown even the loudest voices. Still, for now, the flood carried you. You sat in the dark, listening to the city scream its truth into the void, desperate to be heard. And you realized something haunting. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the watchers had not just come to be seen. Maybe they had come to be spoken, to etch themselves into your voice, seize into your memories, into your stories. Because once a story spreads, it never truly dies. The lights may vanish, the craft may disappear, the silence may return, but the voices remain. Do not forget. The whisper lingers as you close your eyes, the flood of voices still rushing outside your window. And deep inside, you know this was only the beginning, because voices are powerful. But silence is stronger. You remember the silence that followed the flood of voices, not the silence of awe this time, but the silence of doubt. For one night, the city had breathed together. For one night, the desert sky had opened and thousands of eyes had looked upward in unity. For one night, voices had poured out like a storm, screaming the same truth into the world. But truth has enemies. And the morning after, the silence was different. Heavy, calculated, waiting. Do not believe them. The whisper slid through your mind, faint but sharp, as though it knew what was coming. The cover story. At first it came gently, calm voices on radios, newscasters smiling into cameras, officials speaking in measured tones. Unusual lights were seen over Arizona last night, likely military flares. Witnesses may have mistaken ordinary aircraft for something extraordinary. There is no evidence of anything unusual. You felt your chest tighten as you listened. Flares, planes, imagination. The words spread across the city like smoke, creeping into conversations, curling into the cracks of memory. But you remembered. You remembered the silence of the craft. You remembered the immensity blotting out the stars. You remembered the lights steady and alive, not drifting, not flickering, not falling like flares. Still, the cover story grew louder. Officials in uniform spoke of training exercises. Scientists explained away human perception. News anchors chuckled politely, treating it as novelty, as entertainment. The very weight of authority pressed down against the flood of voices, smothering them, twisting them, reshaping them into doubt. They want you to forget. The whisper pressed again, insistent. You shook your head because forgetting was impossible. The memory was burned into you, etched in fire across the canvas of your mind. And yet, you felt the pull of denial creeping close, not from yourself, but from the world around you. Neighbors who had wept with awe the night before now laughed nervously, shrugging off what they saw. Co-workers shook their heads, repeating the word flares until it became a shield. Even those who had cried, who had clutched their children, who had whispered prayers into the night, even they began to bend. Because denial is easy, memory is heavy, and the cover story was crafted to be light. Flares, exercises, mistaken stars, simple, dismissive, forgettable. But you could not forget. You saw the lights hover, steady, deliberate. You saw the stars disappear behind the shadow of something enormous. You heard the whispers that pressed into your bones. Flares do not whisper. Flares do not glide silently across a city. Flares do not unite thousands in awe. Do not let them silence you. The whisper hummed like static, threading through your thoughts. It reminded you of the voices that had poured out into the night, the flood that had carried you, the truth that had been shared. But floods recede, and already the tide was pulling back. Television screens replayed the same shaky footage, anchors laughing, guests smirking. The narrative tightened its grip. The craft became lights. The lights became flares. And the witnesses became mistaken. You felt the weight of it pressing against you, heavier than the shadow of the craft itself. Because this was not silence born of awe. This was silence manufactured, sculpted, enforced. You looked up at the sky again, desperate for the lights to return, for the watchers to show themselves once more, to tear apart the flimsy fabric of the cover story. But the sky was empty, ordinary, cruel in its perfection. The stars blinked coldly above, indifferent, and you felt small again. Small in a different way this time. Not small in awe of something vast, but small beneath the machinery of denial. You whispered to yourself, soft, trembling, "I know what I saw." And the desert answered in its silence. You wondered how many others whispered the same in the quiet corners of their homes. How many resisted the pull of the cover story, how many clung to their memory, refusing to let it be erased, because that was the battle now. Not between you and the watchers, but between you and forgetting, between truth and silence, between memory and the cover story. We remain. The whisper pressed gently, steady, like a hand holding yours in the dark. You shivered because you believed it. The watchers were not gone. They had only chosen their time. But the voices of denial were rising, loud, relentless, weaving their nets around the truth. The cover story spread across the city, across the state, across the nation. Soon, people who had never looked at the sky that night were speaking as if they knew, repeating words they had heard: flares, planes, imagination. The flood of voices began to thin, drowned by the tide. But still, in the quiet, you remembered, and you promised yourself you would not forget, because forgetting was exactly what they wanted. Do not look away. The whisper lingered, steady, alive, and deep inside, you knew the story was not over. The cover story was only the beginning of something darker, something waiting to unfold. You remember the sound of laughter most of all, not the innocent laughter of children playing in the desert dust, nor the gentle laughter of friends sharing stories at dusk. No, this was a sharper sound, a sound meant to slice, a sound meant to cover, to bury, to erase. The flood of voices had shaken the city, thousands calling, thousands remembering, thousands insisting that what they saw was real. The cover story had risen quickly, but it wasn't enough, not yet. The truth was too heavy, too vast, too deeply etched into too many eyes, and so they needed something more. Ridicule. It came days later. A press conference, cameras, reporters gathered, their pens ready, their recorders humming faintly on tables. The air in the room was expectant, charged with the hope that finally someone would take it seriously. You weren't there in person, but you saw it later, on glowing screens, your breath caught in your throat. The governor of Arizona, tall, composed, smiling too easily, stepped up to the podium. His voice was calm, steady, reassuring, the kind of voice meant to cradle a restless public back into silence. "I can see that people are concerned," he said, his tone measured, his words deliberate. "But we have found who's responsible for this." The room tensed. Reporters leaned forward. Witnesses across the state held their breath. Maybe this was it. Maybe the truth was about to be acknowledged. Maybe the weight of thousands of memories would finally be honored. And then, the door opened. A man shuffled in, wearing a ridiculous costume, a silver suit, an alien mask. The governor grinned as the room erupted in laughter. "There you go," he said. "It was just one of our staff playing around." The crowd laughed harder. The cameras flashed, the story crumbled, and inside you, something broke. "They mock you." The whisper seared your mind, sharper this time, cutting deep. You loosed your eyes, but the sound of laughter echoed, louder, harsher, filling every space within you. This was not truth. This was dismissal. This was betrayal. The governor's voice continued, light, almost playful. He thanked the crowd, reassured them, dismissed the event as nothing more than illusion, imagination, comedy, and with his words, the laughter grew. But you remembered. You remembered the silence of the craft, the vast shadow blotting out the stars, the voices pressing into your mind. You remembered the awe of thousands staring upward, breath caught in their throats. You remembered the weight of something so immense it defied all explanation. And now, they wanted you to laugh. They wanted you to forget. But forgetting was impossible, because even as the governor smiled, even as the crowd laughed, the desert still hummed, the silence still lingered, the watchers still waited. We remain. The whisper was gentler now, as though to soothe the sting of mockery. You shivered, your chest tight, your jaw clenched. The betrayal hurt more than denial. Because denial was ignorance, mockery was deliberate. You imagined the faces of those who had witnessed it alongside you, the mother holding her child, the trucker pulling to the side of the road, the officer speaking into his radio, the countless others who had seen what you saw. How must they have felt, watching their truth reduced to a joke? Some laughed nervously, choosing comfort over memory. Some turned angry, their voices rising louder, sharper, desperate to be heard. And some fell silent, the weight of ridicule too heavy to fight against. That was the power of mockery. It did not need evidence. It did not need truth. It only needed laughter, sharp and cruel, to turn certainty into doubt. But you could not doubt because you had seen, because you had heard, because even now, the memory lived behind your eyelids, burning bright as ever. The governor's mockery spread quickly. Newspapers carried pictures of the costumed alien. Headlines twisted the story into novelty. Late-night hosts laughed. The awe of March 13th was buried under smirks and jokes. Yet beneath the surface, the memory pulsed. You knew it did. You could feel it. Because ridicule cannot erase. It can only cover. And you remembered the whispers. Do not forget. You wondered if the governor himself had seen the lights. If he had stood in silence that night, neck craned upward, heart pounding in awe. You wondered if his laughter was not born of disbelief, but of fear, because mockery is a shield, and perhaps he needed one more than anyone else. Even those who saw may lie. The whisper slid gently through your skull, steady, haunting. You felt the truth in it. Even those who know cannot always carry the weight. Some bend beneath it. Some choose the safety of laughter over the danger of belief. But you did not bend, because you had felt the shadow above you. You had heard the silence of the watchers. You had carried their whisper into your dreams. The governor could laugh. The cameras could mock. The officials could dismiss. But none of it could erase what you knew. The night of March 13th was real, and it would never leave you. The mockery echoed for weeks, shaping the story, weaving doubt into the memory of the masses. Many began to shrug it away, their certainty unraveling, their awe buried beneath the weight of ridicule. But not you, because even as laughter filled the air, the desert remained, the stars remained, the watchers remained, and in the stillness of night, when you closed your eyes, you heard them again. We are not gone. The whisper was calm, steady, undeniable, and with it came a vision. The lights returning, brighter than before, hovering once, more above the city, impossible to deny, impossible to laugh away. You gasped softly, heart pounding, eyes snapping open to the ordinary night sky above. The stars twinkled coldly, indifferent, but you knew. You knew they would return, and when they did, no mockery would be enough to erase them. The governor's laughter faded, but its sting remained. It taught you a truth darker than the desert night. Sometimes the greatest enemy of truth is not silence, but ridicule. And deep inside, you sensed the watchers stirring, not angry, not hurt, but patient, because truth does not need to rush. Truth waits. We will show you again. The whisper carried a promise, and with it, the certainty that the story was far from over. You remember the silence after the laughter. The sting of the governor's joke still lingered, echoing in your chest like a wound that would not close. The officials had spoken, the cover story had been written, the reporters had laughed, and for many, that was enough. The voices of the flood began to dim. People shrugged, people doubted, people chose comfort over memory, but not everyone, not you, and not them. Some will not bend. The whisper slid through your mind, softer than breath, steadier than heartbeat. You first noticed it in fragments. A story in the paper, tucked away, describing a pilot who refused to stay silent. A call on late-night radio, the voice of a police officer trembling, but certain. A doctor interviewed on television, his words careful but unshaken. I know what I saw. They were the quiet witnesses, not hysterical, not frantic, calm, professional, solid. And in their calm, you found something stronger than the flood, because floods roar, then recede. But stone remains. You remember one night, sitting by your radio, the desert air cool against your skin, the window cracked open to let the breeze carry the scent of creosote and dust. The voice came through static, low and steady. I was on duty. I saw it pass overhead. It was massive, silent. Not flares, not planes. I don't care what they say. I know what I saw. The line crackled. The host asked questions. The witness spoke without shaking, without laughter, without doubt. And you shivered, because you felt the weight of his certainty. We remain. The whisper came again, layered now with the voices of the witnesses themselves, as though their memory had become a channel for the watchers. You began to collect them, each voice, each testimony, scribbled in notebooks, replayed in your mind, carved into your memory. A pilot who swore the craft stretched farther than his plane's wingspan, silent in, not as it passed. A police officer who pulled to the side of the road, radio crackling with identical reports from colleagues miles apart. A family who stood in their backyard, the children pointing upward, their parents trembling, their words caught in their throats. A doctor who whispered on camera that science had no explanation, but his eyes betrayed awe that words could not hold. They were scattered, yes. Quiet, yes. But together, they formed something stronger, a chorus of steadiness, a counterweight to the cover story. And in their quiet defiance, you found hope. The desert nights felt different now, not just empty stretches of silence waiting to swallow you, but shared spaces, alive with memory. You knew that out there, scattered across Arizona, others were sitting under the same stars, whispering the same words to themselves. I know what I saw. The watchers had not come for nothing. They had come for this, for memory carried not by the loudest, but by the most steadfast. We chose them too. The whisper hummed in your skull, and you believed it. The quiet witnesses were not random. They were chosen, just as you were, because their silence could not be bought with laughter, their memory could not be erased with flares, their truth could not be bent. You imagined them as pillars scattered across the desert, ordinary lives turned into monuments of memory. A pilot filling out his logbook, hand trembling but words certain. A police officer writing his report, ignoring the smirks of superiors. A doctor speaking softly in interviews, voice calm, eyes unwavering. And you wondered if the watchers had known this would happen. If the disappearance of the lights, the silence of the craft, the immensity of the shadow was not meant to convince everyone, but to etch itself into the hearts of the few who would not yield. Remember us. The whisper was soft now, almost tender. And you did. The quiet witnesses gave you strength. You no longer felt like a lone dreamer clutching at impossible memories. You felt like part of a hidden network, a secret constellation of souls bound together by the same vision. The ridicule still stung. The cover story still pressed heavy. But the quiet witnesses reminded you, truth does not vanish when mocked. Truth waits in silence. You began to dream again. Not of laughter, not of denial, but of the lights. The V-shaped craft gliding overhead, vast and silent, its lights pulsing steadily. Each time you woke with tears in your eyes, not from fear, but from longing, because you missed it, because you wanted it to return. And though the city moved on, you carried the weight of its memory. So did they. Somewhere out there, the pilot, the officer, the doctor, the family, they carried it too. The quiet witnesses were living proof that you were not alone, that the truth still breathed beneath the surface. You lifted your eyes to the stars again, and for the first time since the mockery, you felt calm. Not safe, not certain, but calm. Because silence is powerful, and sometimes silence is enough. We are not finished. The whisper lingered as the night stretched above you, vast and indifferent. And deep inside, you knew. The quiet witnesses were not the end. They were only the beginning of something greater. Something waiting to awaken. You remember the waiting. Long nights spent beneath an ordinary sky, your eyes straining against the stars, your chest tight with longing. The craft had passed, the voices had whispered, the city had breathed together, and then it was gone. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The world moved forward. The laughter lingered, the cover story thickened, the silence deepened. People returned to their lives, tucking the memory away into the dusty corners of their minds. But not you. Every night, you watched. The desert became your companion. The stars became your ritual. You lay beneath them, letting the cool air press against your skin, listening to the hush of insects, the faint rustle of wind through cactus spines. You waited, patient but restless, carrying the whispers inside you like embers that refused to die. We will show you again. The promise lingered in your bones, soft but steady, like the beat of a second heart. And then, one night, it happened. You weren't expecting it. That's the cruel truth. After months of waiting, the ritual had become habit. The silence had become ordinary again. You lay on the rooftop, your head resting against the rough surface, the sky endless and still. And then, a glow, faint at first, just a shimmer against the horizon. You blinked, telling yourself it was nothing. An aircraft, a planet, the trick of tired eyes. But then it pulsed. Once, twice, steady, alive. Your breath caught. You sat up, eyes straining, your chest pounding. The glow grew brighter, splitting into 2, then 4, then 6. They hovered, suspended in the night like burning embers, too still for planes, too deliberate for flares, too alive for stars. The lights had returned. Did you think we were gone? The whisper curled through your skull, calm, almost playful. You stood, trembling, your hands clenched at your sides. The air felt heavier now, pressing against, your lungs humming faintly against your skin. The desert had gone quiet, every cricket, every coyote silenced. The lights shifted, moving into formation. A line, a curve, a triangle, each movement deliberate, precise, like sentences written in a language of light. You gasped softly, because it felt like communication. Not random, not accident, purpose. We remain. The whisper threaded itself into your heartbeat, steady, undeniable. You weren't alone this time. From the distance you heard voices, neighbors stepping outside, gasps carried across fences, whispers carried down streets. Cars slowed on the road, headlights cutting through the night as drivers pulled to the side, eyes fixed upward. The flood had not returned, not yet, but the ripple had begun. Witnesses emerging again, scattered but connected, their voices carried by awe. You lifted your eyes higher, watching as the lights hovered, pulsing in unison. Their glow painted the desert floor, faint but steady, like moonlight made deliberate. You strained to see the shadow between them, but this time, the immensity was absent. No vast craft blotting out the stars, no endless shape pressing against your thoughts. Only the lights themselves, hanging weightless in the night. And yet, that made them no less haunting. Because their presence was undeniable. You felt it. The same weight as before, pressing into your chest, threading into your bones. The same hum vibrating faintly through the earth, through the air, through your very body. They were smaller this time, quieter, but no less deliberate. It was not a return in grandeur. It was a reminder. Do not forget us. The whisper was tender now, almost mournful. You shivered, your breath shallow, because you hadn't forgotten. You never could, but many had. You thought of those who had laughed, who had shrugged, who had chosen denial over memory. You thought of the governor's smirk, the cover story's suffocating weight. And now you wondered, was this why they returned? Not to prove themselves, not to silence mockery, but to remind the few who had held on. The lights hovered for minutes that felt like hours. You watched every flicker, every shift, desperate to memorize them, to etch them deeper into your mind. And then, one by one, they faded. Not all at once, not in a burst. Slowly, deliberately, each glow shrinking into nothing as though folding back into the fabric of the night. Until only stars remained. The desert exhaled. The insects returned. The coyotes cried out in the distance. Life moved again, as though the lights had never been there. But you knew they had, because your skin still hummed, because your chest still trembled, because the whisper still lingered. We will return again. The promise threaded itself into your bones, steady, alive. You sank back onto the rooftop, your body trembling, your eyes wide. Sleep would not come that night. Not after what you had seen. Not after what you had felt. Because the watchers had reminded you of something vital. They were not gone. They never had been. And deep inside, you knew. This was not the end. This was only another beginning. You remember the dream first. The dream of stars shifting above you, sliding into place like beads on an invisible string. They moved in silence, their glow steady, forming shapes not of constellations you had learned as a child, but of something older, a triangle, a curve, a perfect V. You woke with the taste of dust on your tongue, your body heavy, your chest humming faintly as though the dream had been more than sleep. You sat up, staring into the night sky beyond your window, and you realized something unsettling. This was not new. The Phoenix lights were not the first. We have always been here. The whisper pressed into your skull, tender, patient, vast. The words lingered as you opened old books, searched faded clippings, listened to the scattered voices of those who had come before. Slowly, you began to see it. A thread woven through time, a pattern etched into the fabric of the desert sky. It stretched back years, decades, centuries. Long before Phoenix was a city of glass and steel, long before highways carved scars across the desert floor, long before neon lights drowned the stars, the lights had been seen by farmers in the 1970s who whispered of glowing orbs drifting silently above their fields, by pilots in the 1950s who swore vast wing-shaped shadows passed beneath their planes, blotting out the stars, by wanderers in the 1800s who told of moving fires in the sky, silent and deliberate, even by the people who first called this land home, the ancient stories carved into stone, paintings of figures beneath strange patterns of stars, passed down through generations like warnings, or perhaps like promises. We remain. The whisper braided itself through each story, each memory, as if it had always been there, waiting for you to notice. You leaned back beneath the desert night, your eyes tracing the heavens, and the longer you stared, the more the patterns emerged. The constellations you once knew, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Dipper, seemed to bend, their stars rearranging into familiar shapes. The V, the triangle, the curve of lights you had seen with your own eyes. It was as though the sky itself had been speaking all along, and you were only now learning to listen. The realization chilled you, because if the patterns were always there, then the watchers were always there, not visitors, not intruders, residents, silent, patient, eternal. We were before you. The whisper thrummed low, a vibration against your ribs, your teeth, the base of your skull. You gasped softly, your body trembling. The desert wind stirred around you, carrying the scent of dust and stone, sharp and ancient. You began to dream even while awake. Images flickered behind your eyes, the same craft gliding above ancient lands, seen by eyes long turned to dust. The same patterns traced by voices forgotten by history. Always the same silence, always the same awe, always the same impossibility written into the sky. It was not accident. It was not random. It was pattern. You wondered if the lights had been guiding you all along, if their shapes were messages drawn across centuries, waiting for someone to notice. Perhaps you were not the first to understand. Perhaps others before you had seen the same, whispered the same, carried the same burden of memory. Perhaps they too had tried to speak it, only to be silenced by laughter, by denial, by the suffocating weight of ridicule. And yet the watchers always returned, because truth waits. Do you see us now? The whisper carried not arrogance, but patience. A question. A test. You swallowed, your mouth dry, your hands trembling. Because yes, you did see now. You saw the line connecting the past to the present to the stars to something greater still. You thought of the governor's mockery, of the cover story, of the quiet witnesses who refused to yield, and suddenly, their presence felt like part of the pattern too. Each voice, each memory, each refusal to forget. The pattern was not only in the sky, the pattern was in you. You stood, your legs heavy, your chest trembling, and lifted your eyes once more to the desert heavens. The stars blinked down coldly, indifferent, but in their indifference you saw shapes, movements, whispers. You could not unsee it now. The sky was alive with pattern. And as the thought bloomed, the whisper pressed into you again, softer this time, almost tender. We will show you more. The promise curled like smoke through your mind, soothing yet haunting, and deep inside, you knew it was true, because the patterns had always been there, and they were only beginning to reveal themselves. You remember the voice before you remember the dream. It came like a breath in the stillness, slipping into your skull in a way that felt both alien and achingly familiar. We are closer than you think. The words carried no sound, yet they echoed in your chest, reverberating against the walls of your mind. You woke with a shiver, your sheets damp with sweat, your heart pounding against your ribs like a trapped animal. You sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, but the ceiling was gone. In your mind's eye, it dissolved into stars, endless and cold, alive with silent movement. You lay back slowly, letting your breath steady, but sleep did not come again. Instead, images lingered behind your eyelids, lights drifting in formation, shadows sliding across the heavens, and shapes, vague, indistinct, yet unmistakably alive, moving just beyond reach. The whispers did not stop when you woke. They followed you into the day, faint, fractured, threaded into the rhythm of your thoughts. Do you feel us? We see you. Not alone. Never alone. You tried to push them away, to convince yourself they were only echoes of dreams, but the desert betrayed you, because the desert was alive with silence. Each time you stepped outside, each time the air pressed against your skin, you felt the weight of unseen eyes. The mountains loomed taller, the cactus arms stretched farther, the wind carried whispers that did not belong to earth. At night, it grew stronger. You would lie beneath the sky, staring into its impossible depths, and the longer you looked, the more it felt like staring back. The stars were no longer distant. They were near, intimate, watching, and the whispers wove themselves into that silence. We are not only light, we are not only sky. The words chilled you, yet soothed you, like hands both tender and cold resting on your shoulders. You began to dream more vividly. Dreams, so sharp they bled into waking memory. In one, you stood in the desert, the sand glowing faintly beneath your feet, the sky pulsing above like a living thing. The lights hovered, their glow painting your skin, and then they shifted, opening, not doors, not hatches, but spaces. Within them, you glimpsed movement, shapes, beings. They were not clear, not human, but not monstrous either. Silhouettes, taller than you, thinner, with movements deliberate and fluid. Their presence was undeniable, their gaze heavy. You tried to look away, but you couldn't. Your body froze, rooted in place as though the desert itself had claimed you. And then one of them spoke, though its mouth never moved. You are seen. You woke gasping, your throat raw, your chest aching as though the air had been stolen from your lungs. The dream clung to you like cobwebs, impossible to shake. But deep inside, you knew it was not only a dream, because the whispers did not fade. The visitors had pressed themselves into your thoughts. You began noticing things around you, small, subtle, impossible to explain. Electronics flickering without cause, radios catching bursts of static that almost sounded like words, streetlights dimming when you walked beneath them, only to flare again when you passed. Coincidence, you told yourself. Imagination. But the whispers said otherwise. We are with you. The thought struck at random. While you washed your hands, while you tied your shoes, while you poured water into a glass. Always gentle, always steady, but always there. The world felt different now. Not yours, not entirely. The desert at night became unbearable in its stillness. You could not sit beneath the stars without feeling the press of unseen presence. You could not close your eyes without seeing shadows moving between the lights. And yet you longed for it. And yet you longed for it. You longed for the awe, for the silence, for the knowledge that you were not alone. Fear and wonder tangled in your chest, inseparable. You called us. The whisper came one night, sharper, more direct. You froze, your breath catching. You called them? How? When? But even as the question formed, you felt the answer bloom inside you. By looking, by waiting, by remembering, by refusing to forget. Perhaps that was the truth of it. The visitors were not summoned by rituals, not by signals, not by machines. They were drawn by memory, by the refusal to let silence erase what had been seen. You are part of us now. The whisper pressed harder this time, layered, echoing, impossible to resist. You gasped, clutching your chest, tears pricking your eyes. You stumbled into sleep, and once more, the dream carried you. This time, the desert stretched endlessly, glowing faintly under a sky alive with lights. The craft hovered above, vast and silent, but now you were beneath it, not as a witness, but as something else, something chosen. Figures stood around you, tall and indistinct, their silhouettes shifting with light that was not light. They leaned close, their presence immense, their gaze steady. You felt no mouth move, but the words filled you nonetheless. Do not fear the silence. Fear forgetting. You fell to your knees in the dream, overwhelmed, trembling, unable to look away from the beings who stood before you. Their forms blurred, but their presence was undeniable. And then they lifted their hands, long, pale shapes, delicate as branches, and touched the air between you. Light flared, blinding, searing, yet not painful. It entered you, filled you, threaded through your skin, your bones, your mind. You woke with tears streaming down your face, gasping as though you had been underwater. Your hands trembled, your body hummed, your skin burned faintly. Though there were no marks, you stumbled to the mirror, staring at your reflection, half expecting to see someone else, but it was only you. Only your face, only your eyes, and yet, not only, because when you looked closely, you swore you saw something else staring back. We are closer than you think, the whisper lingered. You stepped outside, the desert air cool against your skin, the sky endless and alive. You stared upward, and the stars blinked faintly, cold and distant. But you knew better now. They were not distant. They were not indifferent. They were visitors. They had always been here, and they were not finished with you. You remember the silence most of all, not the sacred stillness that fell over Phoenix the night the lights first appeared, not the hush of awe that drew thousands of voices into one. This silence was different, heavier, colder, empty in a way that made your chest ache. It came after the whispers, after the dreams, after the visions of shadows moving between stars. For weeks your nights had been filled with their presence, glimpses in the corner of your mind, words threaded into your thoughts, lights that pulsed with purpose. And then, nothing. The sky returned to ordinary. The stars blinked cold and indifferent, scattered across a black canvas too vast to hold meaning. The desert breathed its usual rhythm, crickets singing, coyotes calling, the wind brushing across sand and stone. but you no longer trusted it, because now silence was not empty. Silence was absence. We are not gone. The whisper had once been your anchor, but now it was gone too. Nights stretched on endlessly, each one heavier than the last. You waited, eyes lifted, your body trembling in anticipation of the glow, the hum, the impossible presence. But the sky gave you nothing. At first you told yourself it was patience. They had promised to return. They had promised not to leave you. The silence was only space, only pause. But as days turned to weeks, weeks to months, silence became something else. Doubt. You remembered the governor's smirk, the laughter of the crowd, the officials dismissing it all as flares. You remembered neighbors shrugging, colleagues smiling, voices dimming into disbelief. What if they were right? What if the whispers had been your imagination? What if the dreams had been only dreams? What if the lights were nothing more than tricks of the eye, tricks of the desert sky? You shook your head, refusing to bend, but the silence pressed harder, because silence does not argue. Silence does not explain. Silence only waits, and the longer it waits, the heavier it becomes. You began to fear the nights. The same rooftop where you once lay in awe now felt like a stage abandoned by its actors. You stared upward until your eyes blurred, but the stars remained cold, lifeless. You listened for the hum, but only crickets sang. You searched for the whispers, but only your own breath echoed inside your chest. The desert mocked you with its stillness. Even the moon seemed cruel, spilling its pale glow across the land without warmth, without meaning. The saguaro loomed like frozen sentinels, their arms raised not in prayer, but in judgment. You closed your eyes, desperate for the dreams to return. But sleep betrayed you. No lights, no shadows, no whispers. Only darkness, heavy and endless, stretching beyond reach. And that was when the fear began. Not fear of the watchers, not fear of what hovered above, fear of their silence. Because silence meant absence. Absence meant abandonment. And abandonment meant you were alone again. Do you miss us? The whisper came faintly, so faint you thought it might be memory, a fragment left behind. You gasped, your chest tightening, your eyes snapping open, but the sky gave you nothing. Silence followed. The fear burrowed deeper. You realized you had grown dependent on them. The watchers, the whispers, the lights. Their presence had filled you with awe, yes, but also with comfort. Proof that you were not alone. Proof that the universe was alive with something more. Now without them the world felt smaller, colder, emptier. You began to search elsewhere. Reports, old clippings, testimonies of others who had seen. You clung to their words like lifelines, whispering them aloud to remind yourself that you were not mad, that you had not dreamed it all. But even those voices faded beneath the weight of silence. The desert became unbearable. Its stillness pressed into your ears, your skin, your bones, until you thought you might scream just to break it. But even if you did, the sound would vanish into the vast emptiness, swallowed whole. The silence was alive now, not neutral, not passive, predatory. It watched you. It judged you. It whispered not with words, but with absence. And in that absence, fear grew. Fear that they had left you. Fear that they would never return. Fear that the night sky had shown you its secrets once, only to steal them away forever. You began to dream again, but these dreams were different. Not of lights, not of visitors, not of awe. You dreamed of silence. Endless, suffocating silence. You wandered deserts without sound. You screamed, but no voice came. You reached for lights that never appeared. You stood beneath a sky so vast and empty that you felt yourself dissolve into nothing. You woke gasping, your throat raw, your body trembling, but the silence followed you into waking. Do not forget us. The whisper came once more, faint and fractured, breaking like static across a dying signal. You clung to it desperately, whispering the words back to yourself as if repeating them might anchor them into reality. But the silence swallowed even that, and the fear grew sharper still. Well, because now you realize something terrifying. Perhaps silence was not absence. Perhaps silence was choice. Perhaps they were still there, watching, waiting, testing. Perhaps their silence was not abandonment, but judgment. Do you fear us, or do you fear yourselves? The thought struck like lightning, sharp and undeniable. You staggered, your body trembling, your breath shallow. You stared into the empty sky, and for the first time you wondered, had they left, or had they drawn closer? Was the silence emptiness, or was it presence too vast for you to hear? The desert wind brushed against your skin, soft, cool, whispering like breath against your ear. The stars blinked faintly above, cold, indifferent, but somehow alive. You shivered because you knew the truth. The fear of silence was not fear of absence. It was fear of what might be hiding within it. The silence pressed heavier, sharper, deeper, and you knew, with bone-deep certainty, that it would not last forever. Because silence is not an ending. Silence is a pause, a waiting. We will speak again. The whisper lingered, steady this time, undeniable, and with it came a chill that spread through your body because you realized the truth. The silence was never empty. The silence was watching you, and soon it would break. You remember the first time you heard the laughter. It cut through you like glass, sharp, mocking, cruel. The governor had stood at his podium, calm and smiling, and turned your awe into a joke. The flood of voices, the trembling certainty of thousands, was buried beneath the smirk of a man in power and the ridiculous costume of a mock alien. The city laughed, the cameras flashed, the memory was bruised, and yet, years later, the laughter returned to you in a different form, not mocking, not cruel, nervous, the nervous laugh of a man finally removing his mask. Even those who mock will one day remember. The whisper threaded softly into your skull, patient, haunting. It began with rumors, small, scattered at first, whispers of the governor speaking differently, quietly, to those who asked. Then, an interview. His face older now, his voice steadier but tinged with regret. You sat in silence as the screen flickered, his image grainy, his words deliberate. I saw it too, he said. The room around you seemed to still, your breath caught in your throat. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of years. I saw the lights, I saw the craft. It was enormous, silent. It wasn't flares, it wasn't planes, it was real. The man who once laughed now confessed. The man who mocked now remembered. And in that moment, the wound reopened. You leaned closer, your body trembling, your chest tight. The governor's voice was calm, almost soothing, as he described what you already knew. The V-shaped formation, the immense shadow blotting out the stars, the silence that pressed against the city like a living thing. I didn't know what to do, he admitted. People were scared, the state was restless, and I was told to keep calm, to keep order, to make light of it. So I did. I made a joke. But the truth is, I saw it too, and it was not from here. You gasped, softly, tears pricking your eye. Yes. The memory of his mockery clashed with the weight of his confession, your mind struggling to hold both truths at once. The governor's smile was gone now. His face was grave, his eyes dark with something that looked like fear. They told me to keep quiet, to laugh, to dismiss, but I've carried it ever since, and I can't carry it alone anymore. Even those in power cannot silence forever. The whisper pressed against your skull, resonant, alive. You closed your eyes, your breath trembling, and for a moment you were back beneath that sky, the silence pressing down on you, the lights glowing steady and deliberate. You remembered the awe. You remembered the whispers. You remembered the truth. And now, the governor's voice joined yours. You weren't alone. The confession spread slowly, carried by screens, by papers, by voices whispering across the desert once more. Some dismissed it, shaking their heads, calling it too little, too late. Others leaned forward, listening, their own memories stirred, their own doubts silenced. But for you, it was more than vindication. It was pattern. Because now you saw it clearly. The laughter, the silence, the confession. all parts of the same story, all threads in the same weave. The Watchers had not come only for you. They had not come only for the city. They had come for all of you, including those who mocked, including those in power. No one was immune. We reach all hearts. The whisper curled through your chest, soothing, steady. You believed it. The governor's confession did not heal the wound, but it changed it. The ridicule no longer cut as deeply because now you saw the truth behind it, fear. The laughter had never been strength. It had been weakness, trembling beneath the weight of the unknown. And now, years later, that mask had cracked. You lifted your eyes to the desert sky once more. The stars blinked faintly, indifferent, but you knew better. Behind them, the Watchers waited, patient, eternal. And you knew, with a certainty that chilled you, that the confession was not an ending. It was a signal. Because if those in power could admit the truth, then the silence could not last much longer. The story is not finished. The whisper lingered as you stared into the endless dark, your body trembling with a mix of awe and dread. The governor's confession had changed everything. And deep inside, you knew what was coming next. Not silence, not laughter, something greater, something waiting to break through. You remember the dream as though it were carved into your bones. A vast desert stretched around you, endless and silent, the stars burning bright above like watchful eyes. You stood alone, trembling, your breath misting in the cool air. Then, a voice, not booming, not loud, but steady as the earth beneath your feet, slid into your thoughts. What do you believe? The words struck deeper than any image, any light, because they were not about the Watchers. They were about you. You woke with your chest aching, your body trembling, your mind spinning. The governor's confession still echoed in the world outside, whispered on radios, printed in papers, replayed in shaky interviews. Some dismissed him, some praised him, some shook their heads, confused. But for you, the confession had done more than confirm what you saw. It forced you to confront a truth you had been circling all along. Belief mattered. The desert seemed to know it too. Each night, when you stepped outside, the air felt heavier, as though belief itself had changed it. The silence no longer pressed with absence, but with possibility. You could almost feel it vibrating against your skin, humming beneath your ribs. The Watchers had shown themselves. Yes, they had whispered. They had vanished. They had mocked and been mocked. But none of it lingered the way belief did. Belief was alive. Your mind shapes us. The whisper came again, faint but certain. You gasped, clutching your chest, because you felt the truth in it. The Watchers were not only light and shadow, they were reflection, resonance, a mirror not of glass, but of thought, and if thought could shape them, then belief could summon them. The idea shook you. It filled you with wonder, but also with dread. Because belief was not pure. Belief was fragile. It could inspire, but it could also destroy. And if thousands carried doubt, if thousands mocked, if thousands dismissed, what did that shape? You walked the desert one evening, the sky above you deep and endless, the mountains jagged silhouettes against the dying glow of dusk. Each star blinked faintly, steady, cold. But as you stared, they seemed to shift, to pulse, as though leaning closer. You whispered to yourself, soft, trembling, "I know what I saw," and the stars pulsed brighter. "We hear you." The voice braided itself through the desert wind, tender, soothing. Your breath shook. You stepped farther into the silence, your body trembling with a mix of awe and fear. You weren't alone, not just because of the Watchers, not just because of the whispers, but because belief bound you to others. The quiet witnesses, the thousands who still remembered, the governor who finally confessed. You imagined them all, scattered across Arizona, across the world, lifting their eyes to the same sky, whispering the same words, "I believe." And you realized something vast, something terrifying. Belief was not small, belief was collective, a flood, a force, a current that could not be erased by laughter or silence. Together, you shape us. The whisper pressed harder now, urgent, resonant. You staggered, your knees weak, your chest trembling. You could feel it in your bones. Belief was not only recognition, it was creation. The watchers existed beyond you, yes, but through you, they grew. The thought filled you with awe, but also with dread, because belief is not always kind. Belief can twist, belief can fracture. And you wondered, what else might be shaped in the sky if enough hearts believed in fear instead of wonder? The desert wind stirred, cool and sharp, brushing against your skin like unseen fingers. You lifted your eyes higher, and for a moment the stars bent again, sliding into formation. A V, a triangle, a perfect curve. Your chest tightened, your throat caught. It was happening again. On. The lights shimmered, faint but steady, pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. You gasped, tears spilling unbidden down your cheeks. They had returned, but this time something felt different. The glow was softer, the formation more fragile, as though it was not only them revealing themselves to you, but you summoning them through belief. You whispered the words again, your voice breaking. I know what I saw. The lights brightened. Yes. The whisper filled your skull, not as command, not as question, but as affirmation. You fell to your knees in the sand, your body trembling, your breath ragged, because now you understood. It had never been only about them, it had always been about you, about all of you. The watchers were not only visitors, they were mirrors, they were echoes. They were shaped not by flares, not by laughter, not by denial, but by belief. The silence broke, not with sound, not with roar, but with presence, lights pulsing, whispers pressing. The sky alive again, responding to the simple act of remembering. You sobbed softly, overwhelmed, your tears wetting the desert dust, because now you knew. Belief was power, belief was connection, belief was everything. And as the lights glowed above, the whisper carried its final message into your bones. Do not let them take it from you. The lights dimmed, fading one by one, folding back into the fabric of the night. The stars returned, cold and ordinary, but you were not fooled. The watchers remained, and so did belief. You stood slowly, your body trembling, your chest still humming, and lifted your eyes to the heavens once more. The sky looked empty, but inside you, it was alive, because now you carried the truth. Belief is power, and power cannot be silenced forever. The night deepened, the desert whispered, the stars blinked faintly, and you knew with certainty that something greater was stirring. Something belief itself was about to awaken. You remember the dream as though it was not yours alone, a desert, glowing faintly beneath a sky without stars. Silence pressed against your chest, heavy and expectant, and then light. Not blinding, not burning, but soft, like moonlight woven into shape. Figures emerged from it, tall and indistinct, their movements fluid, their eyes like molten silver. Do you hear us? The voice was not sound. It was thought. It was presence. It was inside you, threading through your bones, vibrating faintly at the edges of your breath. You wanted to speak, but your mouth gave you nothing, only silence. Yet still, they answered. You do. You woke gasping, your sheets tangled, your skin damp with sweat. The whisper lingered in your skull, soft but undeniable. And then you realized something unsettling. This was not the first time. The echoes had been there all along, faint, fragmented, a thought not quite yours, a dream not quite dream, a memory that felt borrowed. The lights had been more than spectacle. The silence had been more than absence. You had already been touched, already been reached. Contact was not coming. Contact had begun. You stepped outside, the desert air cool against your skin, the horizon glowing faintly with the last breath of dusk. The sky stretched vast and endless above you, its stars steady and indifferent. But you no longer saw them as indifferent. They were alive. not distant, not silent, alive. You walked slowly into the desert, the sand crunching softly beneath your feet, the smell of dust sharp in the air. Each step felt heavier, each breath thicker, as though the world itself leaned closer. We remain. The whisper came again, soft and layered, and this time you did not resist. You let it wash through you, your body trembling, your eyes closing as the soundless words threaded themselves into your chest. It was not a command. It was not a warning. It was acknowledgement. Contact. You opened your eyes, and for a moment, the desert shimmered. Shadows moved at the edges of your vision, tall and thin, their shapes flickering against the starlight. You blinked, and they were gone, but the echo remained, vibrating faintly in your bones. You whispered aloud, your voice shaking, "I know you are there." And the night answered. A faint glow pulsed at the horizon, soft, distant, deliberate. You gasped, your chest tightening, your body trembling, because it was not coincidence, not imagination, it was response. The glow pulsed once more, then faded, swallowed by the night. But the echo lingered. Contact was not about touch, not about sound, not about spectacle. It was about presence. It was about resonance. It was about two worlds brushing against each other in silence, leaving behind vibrations that never truly fade. You carried it with you into the days that followed. Each step hummed faintly with their presence. Each glance at the sky revealed shapes you could almost, but not quite, see. Each dream pressed heavier, filled with voices not your own, and you knew you were not alone. Others carried it too. You heard it in their voices, strangers calling into late-night radio shows, their tones steady but trembling as they described the same dreams, the same whispers. Pilots speaking carefully of impressions that lingered after flights. Families whispering of children waking in the night, eyes wide, whispering, they were here. The echoes were not just yours, they were scattered, shared, carried by many. Contact was not singular, it was collective. Together, you feel us. The whisper pressed into your chest again, layered with voices, countless and overlapping. You staggered, clutching your ribs, your knees weak. Tears pricked your eyes as the weight of it filled you. You were not special. You were not chosen. You were part of something larger. The watchers had touched not one, but many. And now, their echoes spread like ripples in water, threading through dreams, pressing into silence, shaping the way you all looked at the sky. The desert felt different now, alive in its stillness, heavy in its silence. The stars were no longer points of light but doorways, windows, eyes. You walked each night, your breath shallow, your body trembling, waiting for the glow, the hum, the echo. Sometimes it came faintly, a flicker at the edge of vision, a static burst through the radio, a whisper threading through your thoughts. Other nights, nothing, only silence. But even in silence, you knew they were there. Because silence was not absence anymore. Silence was contact too vast for words. You dreamed again. This time, the desert stretched endless, glowing faintly beneath a sky alive with moving lights. Figures stood in the distance, tall and fluid, their eyes burning silver. You stepped toward them, trembling, your body weightless. Do you see us? The thought pressed into your skull, soft but insistent. You nodded, your throat too tight for words. Then you are not alone. You fell to your knees in the dream, tears streaming down your cheeks. The figures leaned closer, their shapes flickering, their presence immense. One reached out, not with a hand, but with light. It touched your chest, and you gasped as warmth flooded through you, soothing and overwhelming all at once. You woke sobbing, your body trembling, your skin tingling with the afterglow of light that was not there, and you knew. Contact had already happened, not in fire, not in spectacle, in whispers, in echoes, in the quiet places between thought and breath. The watchers had touched you, and you would never be the same. You stepped outside once more, lifting your eyes to the sky, your body trembling with awe. In fear, the stars blinked faintly, steady and cold, but you no longer saw them as distant. You whispered aloud, your voice shaking, "I believe." And for the faintest moment, the horizon glowed in response. You remember the first time you realized the sky was not empty. It was a memory disguised as a dream, a fragment you carried like a whisper pressed against the back of your mind. You were lying on your back in the desert, staring upward, and the stars blinked not randomly, not as chance, but deliberately. They blinked as though they were eyes watching you. "Do you finally see us?" The whisper came then, soft as breath, heavy as stone. It sank into you, not like an intruder, but like a presence that had always been there, waiting for you to notice. You woke gasping, your throat raw, your chest trembling. But when you stepped outside into the cool night air, the dream did not leave you, because the sky did not feel distant anymore. It felt close. It felt alive. The desert stretched outward in silence, its vastness broken only by the jagged silhouettes of mountains and the pale glow of the moon. The saguaros stood like watchmen, their arms raised toward the heavens as though in salute. You tilted your head back, your breath caught in your throat. The stars blinked above, steady, endless, familiar. And yet, the longer you stared, the less familiar they became. You noticed patterns again, the V, the triangle, the perfect curve. But now, the patterns shifted. They weren't static. They weren't fixed. They moved. Slowly, subtly, as though rearranging themselves in response to your gaze. Your chest tightened, your knees weakened. Because it was not you looking at the stars. It was the stars looking back. "We are always here." The whisper slid through your mind, patient, haunting, undeniable. Your breath shook. You whispered aloud, your voice trembling in the still air. "What are you?" The silence deepened, pressing against your skin, your ribs, your bones. And then the stars pulsed. Once, twice, a rhythm, a heartbeat. "We are what you believe." You staggered, clutching your chest, tears prickling your eyes. The words were not explanation, not definition, but reflection. They bent the question back onto you. The sky shimmered faintly, the stars flickering, shifting, sliding into new positions. You gasped softly because they formed not constellations, but shapes. Shapes you remembered. The same patterns you had seen before, the same patterns carved into stone by hands long gone. The same shapes whispered in your dreams. The sky was speaking. No. Listening. No. Both. Contact had never been about one side reaching to the other. It had always been about the space between, about the gaze that flows both ways. And now, that gaze was undeniable. The sky was aware. The sky was watching back. You fell to your knees in the sand, your eyes wide, your chest heaving. Awe pressed against you like a weight too vast to carry. You wanted to look away, but you couldn't. You wanted to close your eyes, but the sky held them open. The stars pulsed again, their glow steady, deliberate, not random, not chance. And then you saw it, the shadow. It moved across the heavens, vast and silent, blotting out constellations as it passed. A shape without edges, without limit, a darkness larger than anything you could comprehend. It was not just above, it was part of the sky itself. Do not fear the silence. The whisper threaded through your bones, soothing, patient. But you did fear, not because they were there, but because they had always been there. The sky had never been empty. The sky had always been watching, and you had lived your whole life blind to it. Your body trembled as the realization sank into you. Every night you had ever looked upward, you had been seen. Every wish whispered into the stars, every gaze lost in constellations, every childhood question, "Are we alone?" had never been unanswered. The watchers had always been listening, and now they were answering. The silence deepened, pressing heavier, sharper, more intimate. You felt it in your ribs, in your teeth, in the marrow of your bones, the kind of silence that is not empty but full. Alive. You gasped softly, your tears spilling, because you could feel their gaze not on your body, not on your face, but on your very soul. The sky saw you, all of you, every thought, every fear, every hope, every belief. You are not small. The words surged into you, layered, countless, impossible to resist. You sobbed, your hands pressed into the sand, your body shaking beneath the immensity of it. Not small, not alone, never alone. The stars pulsed again, softer now, their glow gentle, tender. The vast shadow shifted, sliding silently across the heavens, its immensity undeniable, its presence overwhelming. You whispered aloud, your voice breaking, "Why us? Why now?" The silence answered with light. The stars rearranged themselves once more, forming not constellations, not patterns, but a single line across the heavens, a line that stretched from horizon to horizon, infinite and unbroken. Because you finally looked back. The whisper filled you, resonant, haunting, soothing, and with it came the final realization. The sky had always been alive. The watchers had always been present. The only thing that changed was you. The only thing that mattered was belief. The silence held you there for what felt like eternity, your body trembling, your chest aching, your eyes wet. The sky pulsed above, alive, aware, watching. And then, slowly, the stars returned to their familiar places. The shadow faded. The silence softened. The sky looked ordinary again. But you knew better now. The sky was not indifferent. The sky was not passive. The sky was not empty. The sky was watching back, and with that truth came a chill that spread through you, heavy, unshakable, because if the sky was alive, if the sky was aware, if the sky was watching, then what was it waiting for? Soon, the whisper lingered, soft but sharp, a promise or a warning. You shivered, lifting your eyes once more to the stars. They blinked faintly, steady, silent. But you no longer trusted their silence, because now you knew. The sky was alive, the sky was watching, and the story was not over, not yet. You remember it now the way you remember a dream that refuses to fade, not sharp, not precise, but heavy, threaded through every breath you take. The night the sky opened, the night the lights appeared, the night silence became alive. You have carried it with you ever since. Do not forget. The whisper still lingers, softer now, fading like the last note of a song. But even fading, it remains. The years have passed, and the desert has not changed. The mountains still loom like guardians in the distance, their jagged spines catching the glow of dusk. The saguaros still raise their arms toward the heavens, silent and eternal. The stars still blink faintly above, cold and distant. And yet, for you, nothing is the same. Because you know, the sky is not empty. The silence is not absence. The lights were real, and they are still here. You walk the desert trails at night, your breath slow, your body calm, your eyes lifted. The crickets sing, the coyotes cry, the wind brushes cool against your skin. The ordinary world continues, but beneath it, you feel the hum. It never left. It threads through the silence, faint and steady, a reminder that you are never truly alone. Others feel it too. You hear them sometimes, in voices carried on radio waves, in stories whispered at campfires, in testimonies that refuse to die. Pilots, police, families, children, strangers scattered across the land, bound together by the same memory, the lights above, the silence below, the awe that shook them to their core. They remember, and in their remembering, the legacy grows, because stories are not small, Stories are seeds. Once planted, they spread. We remain through you. The whisper presses softly into your skull, patient, soothing. You close your eyes, tears stinging at the edges, because you know it's true. The lights themselves may fade, the shadows may vanish, the watchers may return to silence. But belief endures, memory endures, and through them, the legacy breathes. You think back to the governor's confession, the man who once mocked, once laughed, finally admitting the truth that haunted him. His voice still echoes in your mind. I saw it too. Those words mattered, not because they erased the laughter, not because they silenced the cover story, but because they joined the chorus, because every voice that remembers strengthens the legacy. The Phoenix Lights are no longer only an event, they are a story, a memory shared by thousands, a question whispered by millions, and stories are harder to bury than lights. You lie on your back one night, the desert cool against your skin, the stars endless above. You let your breath steady, your eyes soften, your body sink into the earth, and you remember. The vast shadow blotting out the heavens, the lights steady, deliberate, alive, the silence pressing heavier than sound, the whispers threading through your bones. It all comes back, not as dream, not as illusion, but as truth, and for a moment you feel them again. You are part of us now. The words slip through you, soothing, haunting. You shiver, but not with fear, with belonging, with awe, because this was never only about them. It was always about you, about belief, about memory, about carrying the story forward. That is the legacy, not the lights themselves, not the craft, not even the watchers. The legacy is the remembering. You wonder sometimes what future eyes will see. Will children yet unborn stand in backyards, pointing upward, whispering the same words? Will strangers in faraway lands share their own versions of the lights, their own moments of silence made alive? You think they will, because the watchers are patient, because the sky is eternal, because belief, once sparked, never dies. We wait. The whisper hums faintly, like a promise suspended in the air. You open your eyes and lift them once more to the heavens. The stars blink steadily above, cold and indifferent, or so they seem. But you know better now. They are not indifferent. They are not distant. They are not silent. The sky watches back, and you watch in return. The desert night deepens. The wind carries the scent of dust and stone. The stars burn bright, alive, eternal, and you lie there, calm, trembling, filled with the quiet certainty that the story is not finished. The Phoenix Lights were not the beginning. They were not the end. They were a chapter, a reminder, a whisper in the long silence of history, and their legacy is you. You carry it, you share it, you keep it alive, because stories are not small. Stories are seeds, and once planted, they never die. The night is still, the desert is vast, the sky is alive, and as you close your eyes, the whisper returns one last time, soft as breath, heavy as eternity. We will return. You inhale, your chest heavy, your body trembling, and you know, with a certainty that chills you, that the legacy of the lights is not memory alone. It is promise, and promises do not fade.